Hello everyone, my name is Csaba. I'm the facilitator of today's webinar together with my colleague Simon. Thanks very much for joining us today. We appreciate that so many of you have registered. This is the second virtual session of our webinar series for clinical professionals. And yeah, we have attendees from I can see both companies, from sponsored companies, pharma companies, as well as CROs in our audience. Welcome everyone. Before we jump in, just some housekeeping. I would like to go through some points. So you're all muted by default. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be available later on. And you can see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So please do submit your questions during the presentation, because we will take time at the end to answer them. We'll also have some polls during the webinar, so we hope that you will contribute to this session by participating and making the session a bit more interactive. So the presenters today, Simon is our Director of Solution Consulting, Assure Clinical. He's based in Cambridge in the UK, and my name is Csaba. I'm Director of Business Development, and I'm based in Berlin in Germany. About the agenda. So today's topic is about the future of clinical trials. I think everyone is aware the new situation is posing great challenges for life sciences companies and really steering strategies as this pandemic is impacting the conduct of clinical trials. So first we'll look at some of these challenges which companies are facing and struggling due to the virus and the restrictions in place. I'm sure that many of you know and have seen the FDA and the EMA has published guidance documents. It's really to provide general considerations to assist sponsors and CROs in assuring safety of trial participants and maintaining compliance with GCP, minimizing the risk to the trial integrity during the pandemic. So we'll look at some of the key takeaways. After that, the topic is about how do we address these challenges and how can technology help to limit or overcome these issues, these barriers. And we will show you how our technology solves some of these problems which are impacting clinical operations. Of course, we hope that this difficult time will end soon and companies can really start thinking about the future. It is very likely that there will be changes and there will be new norms. So it will be very important, I think, for everyone, for all the different players in life sciences to know and to plan how we will all adapt to this new situation. All right. So what are the current challenges? And that are impacting really clinical operations. First of all, this is really extraordinary. I don't think any of us have seen anything similar to this situation. Considering this pandemic, there are really global restrictions impacting nearly every country in the world. So it's not only impacting our work, but impacting travel, impacting our personal lives. Restrictions vary from country to country. So there may be national or even regional legislations, restrictions in place. This is a very dynamic situation. So what is valid for today might not be valid tomorrow. Some measures and changes might actually change or come overnight. So that's posing even more challenges. Our healthcare systems, so hospitals and healthcare institutions and sites are impacted. There are limited access to these sites. Due to that, there's a great challenge to actually open new sites or even access existing sites due to the restrictions or participants not being available or not being able to travel. So you can see there's difficulties in the ongoing recruitment, but also on the continued involvement of patients in the trials. So some of the the considerations. So as mentioned, the situation is really evolving, so we need to look at the solutions in a pragmatic way. What is the best out of this situation that we can get? Again, those national legislations, even regional legislations, should be taken into account. I mean, those can't be ignored. What is also important that the healthcare professionals participating in the trials or even investigators might have to commit to other critical tasks or might not be available, or they might be even in quarantine or self-isolation. So that's big. That's very difficult to overcome. What is also really important is the data protection is still important. It's still a requirement to protect the data and following the protocols. We'll talk about the FDA and the EMA guidance regarding, what, documenting changes and also the evidence, as it's very important. And overall, I think no matter what happens, the health and safety and the well-being of the patients is important. And both FDA and the EMA documents talk about that. So, these are really challenges which makes it very difficult to meet milestones, budgets, data integrity. This is just some of the challenges. So there are many more, and these have been immediate. So would like to start, Paul, a question and ask you. So you will see on the screen a pop-up in a second. Would like to know how this COVID-19 situation is actually impacting your strategy. So you will see in a second. So give another 15, 20 seconds. Right. So the question was, how is COVID-19 changing your 2020 and beyond clinical strategy? So it seems like, many companies are still evaluating, probably assessing. We need to see the end of the tunnel, see what we should be changing. And equally, some companies and some participants mark that they have to reassess the entire strategy. And a few people mentioned that they're making minor alterations. Thank you for your responses. Yeah, so the situation is pretty much like that. So we are in a storm, we're in a situation that hasn't been seen before, and we need to find a way out, and we hope that this situation will be over soon. But we also need to look at ways how we can adapt to this situation and how we can keep our business running. So before we show you how technology can help with that, I would like to look at both the FDA and the EMA guidance. These were published in the past couple of days and weeks, and there have been also updates to these. Important, is that the FDA and the EMA, the health authorities, are recognizing that this pandemic is impacting the conduct of clinical trials of medical product. They mentioned the challenges we just talked about, from quarantines, site closures, travel bans, limitations, interruptions, site personnel being impacted or even being infected and not be able to work. And they understand that these challenges really lead to difficulties in meeting the protocol specified procedures, and the protocol mandated visits. So what are some of the key takeaways? So let's look at some of the points. Obviously, the entire guidance document is available. You can find it easily on their website, or you can also just email us. So let's look at some of the points on the FDA guidance, some of the key takeaways. First of all, the trial participants may not be able to come to the site for the specified visit. So they really recommend that the sponsors should evaluate alternative methods for the safety assessment. So they mention, virtual visits, alternative locations for assessment, phone contacts, and a few others. Important that the impact to the study protocols have to be assessed. For example, delays. So if the study cannot be conducted under the existing protocol, then the sponsor must determine whether to completely stop the recruitment or even withdraw trial participants. One thing they mentioned about the COVID-19 screening procedures, that these do not need to be reported in the protocol unless the sponsor is incorporating this data as part of the new research of that objective. Let's look at some others. And many paragraphs, they mention the importance of documentation. So really, no matter what contingency measures are being implemented, sponsors and investigators should document these reasons, what is being done. Changes in study visits, schedules, the missed visits, and they should be all captured. This specific information should be captured in a case report form. And they also mention if the planned on-site visits are no longer possible, then sponsors should consider optimizing either using remote or central monitoring programs to maintain the oversights of the clinical sites. So I wanted to highlight these as, these are only a few points from a 15-page long document. What is also important to mention is that each clinical trial is unique with respect to patient population, medication, geographic needs. So there's no single solution to manage the risk due to coronavirus. And the risk-benefit ratio associated with each specific clinical trials must be considered when decisions are being made. And these recommendations from the FDA are non-binding. It's a list of non-binding recommendations. And there's also an FAQ at the end of this guidance document, also very, very useful. So let's look at the EMA guidance. They also published a document around the same time, and there have been a couple of versions of these guidance documents. These are intended to provide guidance for all parties involved in the clinical trials. And, due to the evolving situation, they also predict that there will be further updates. So further updates are very likely to come. They also talk about the national legislations, that these may take priority over these general recommendations, and that actions should be proportionate. It's really based on benefits and risks. Again, it's important here, the impact on the health and the safety of the trial participants. There's a paragraph dedicated to initiation of new trials, so additional risk to the participants should be addressed. And I have a couple of more ones. So they also talk about ongoing trials and what possible changes there are. So they're recommending either phone or video visits instead of physical visits. An action could be to slowing down the recruitment of the new trial participants, or even extension of the duration of the trial, or in other cases, the temporary halt or even closing of the sites may be necessary. It is expected that the sponsor performs risk assessment of each individual ongoing trial and implement these measures, again highlighting the importance of the subject safety. And they also expect the sponsors to reassess the risk as the situation develops. And there are some oversight responsibilities regarding monitoring and QA activities. Those need to be reassessed as well. and they understand the likelihood to see more protocol deviations than normal. So as you can see, there are quite many similar points and considerations, between the EMA and the FDA guidance. They also talk about the communication agreement with authorities and sites, changes to informed consent, changes in the distribution of the investigational medicinal product, changes to auditing and monitoring. So it's quite an exhaustive list of things to consider. And again, it's expected to see more updates from the EMA in Europe. So if you don't have these documents, you can easily find them online on the website, or you can contact us and we can send you the link. And it's also recommended to really continue engage with your network and community to to push forward with creative risk mitigation and issue resolution plans during this time. All right, so that's let's look at some trends in innovation, and I will hand it over to Simon to talk about these points.
Thanks, Csaba. So moving into the technology side of the changes, obviously, with Sure Clinical, this is just our opinion and what we've seen or what we were seeing before. So whilst the world at the moment has had a much more distributed workforce, much more than it's ever been, this was slowly happening before the COVID-19 pandemic happened. It was something we certainly saw with many more companies pushing people to work from home more, at least 1 or 2 days a week, or even permanently. And we also saw, or were starting to see, a slow transition, towards remote monitoring. So it was something that we'd seen before. One of the original drivers really was to reduce travel costs in terms of managing sites and site visits, but it was something that we've seen pop up more and more before all of this happened. Because of this, with the technology, devices and systems have allowed remote monitoring of patients and sites. As the technology world in general improves and evolves, there are, as we all know, there's a huge amount more medical devices now that can be used for monitoring. Whether it's ECGs on your hand, on your wrist, or EKGs on your wrist, that sort of thing that can be used as medical devices. And we're seeing lots more approvals going through and patents being filed for software and technology as medical devices. And from a system point of view, so particularly what we do within Sure Clinical, obviously we're a cloud-based system, and everything we do is to keep everybody's data safe, but also to keep it remote, so you don't need to worry about where you physically are to access it. There's been a big trend towards document management online, review workflows and processes. Lots and lots of companies wanting to modernize, to digitize, and to become paperless. So in terms of how they manage any document, not necessarily trial documents, but even if it's training documents, SOPs, internal file shares, getting rid of the P drive or the X drive or whatever people use, and actually moving towards an online system, particularly those that are cloud-based. We're seeing huge preferences towards that as well. So there's a lot of that. And of course, we've seen recent announcement from agencies where they're much more accepting of technology, much more than they ever have been. E-submissions and electronic submissions obviously aren't new, but they are something where the technology has improved and advanced quite a lot. And we even saw very recently, within the last week, the EMA announcing that they will be doing e-signatures for approval certificates. So instead of physically handwriting and posting it, they will be using digital signatures for that. So that's something very interesting. The FDA have traditionally been more advanced in terms of digital signatures. They encourage 1572s and licenses and all that sort of stuff to come through to them with a signature. But the EMA now starting to use a system to post out or to send out their approvals and their approval letters. We personally think will become a shift as it filters down through the agencies. We had a couple of questions come in before the webinar on different countries and how they use digital signatures or wet signatures, which we can talk about in a minute. So in terms of what we see, and again, this is our opinion from Sure Clinical. So us, we live in the e-clinical world, and particularly the clinical operations world. So really thinking about digital signatures, online document management, quality management, eTMF and CTMS. My personal opinion, and this is again really is a personal opinion, is I think we're going to see a big reduction in paper moving forward, really from two aspects. One of them will be electronic signatures. I think people will move a lot more to now. Obviously, one of the sort of the factors that's always drawn it back is the agency's reluctance to use them and accept them themselves. I think that will change. Whether that's a short-term thing, I don't know, but we will see. The other is document upload and retrieval remotely, particularly with the amount of cloud-based systems that are around. You know, thinking of ours, everything we do is cloud-based, everything we do is remote. So whether you're uploading patient documents or some source data, or needing to retrieve that, everything we do is cloud-based. You know, all you need is an internet connection to log in and get that information out. And I think we're going to see a push towards that now because of the situation and the way that COVID-19 has actually forced us into that. Obviously, there's going to be a huge amount, as Csaba mentioned, of specific documentation around COVID-19 related changes. So whether it's protocol deviations coming in for COVID-19, for example, of course, the agencies have said that that's absolutely fine, but it will be taken into account when a study comes to be inspected. But if you can have a system that calls that out, it will make your life a lot easier come down the road. You know, if you think with an ETMF, for example, if you've archived it 5 years later or 3 years later, even when if you're in an inspection, just to be able to see that that documentation has actually been tagged with COVID-19 will help you be able to explain what happened and why. And of course, you need the secure management of deviation documentation. It needs to be live for everybody. You know, we can't write it down at the moment. There's really no way of doing that. You could post it to different people, but it's basically not a usable solution. I think we're going to see more workforces increasingly distributed. All of this, we're imagining, or will at least think that we will see more people working from home and a more distributed workforce, even more than there was before. Of course, with cloud technology, and I would say this, of course, working for Shaw Clinical, but there's no reliance on a physical location. It really doesn't matter where you are. As long as you've got the internet, you'll experience the same connection as you would at home, in the office, sorry. And, you know, little things like login limits. We all saw the days after, you know, myself in the UK, the day after the lockdown was announced in the morning, everyone's VPNs with their companies were struggling. Everyone's bandwidth was struggling because there was this huge sort of pinch point. And with cloud technology, you know, it's very easily scalable. We don't really have to worry about that. And we're also, I think we're going to see differences in how we manage study personnel. So in terms of managing site staff, patients, investigators, nurses, etc., and study staff, a decent, you know, a more improved way of managing those staff internally, getting all their documentation in to make sure it's safe, it's secure, it's been digitally signed, for example, where it needs to be, and that it's always going to be kept in the right place and it's always going to be kept safe. And of course, most importantly, patient information and patient data is kept safe as well. Just to kind of close this out, I want to just show a quick demo of how we use the system and just what we do at Shaw Clinical, just for your information. It'll only be a couple of minutes, but hopefully explains a little bit of the way that we see the world. In front of you is a slide about the systems for remote monitoring, and particularly in terms of what we do with the ETMF, CTMS, and we're releasing an ISF later in the year. But a lot of this information can be done and it can be kept securely and can be managed by your monitors, whether they are remote or whether they are at site. They've always got the choice, but they're always going to see the same performance. So something we try very, very heavily to increase is the use of portals. So a portal is a way of getting a document into a system or into an area without needing to have a login, without having to train site staff, give them a login, give them a huge amount of work just for them to upload 1 or 2 documents. We really, really want to reduce that. And we have something called the Shaw portal, which in our world is unique from the way we do that. We can capture, we can collect, we can e-sign documents and forms, and it really makes users' lives easier in being able to do that. We also have the CTMS as well, and of course, you know, having the overall view in the world, the global picture of a CTMS. Managing milestones, things like remote monitoring, activities and protocol deviations, and just thinking the best way to do that. And of course, with the applications that you have with remote monitors, if a remote monitor can get an email of their schedule within the next month, as you can out of Shaw Clinical, it's something that's really going to be able to help them manage those site visits, manage the personnel. They can complete their visits online. They can fill out their forms and documentation, even send off a workflow automatically that's going to go to their manager for review or approval if they're using a monitoring visit report workflow. So all of that good stuff is kept within a system, and just something for you guys to think about or potentially think about as you move forward after this webinar and beyond. So I'm going to give a very quick webinar, a quick demo, I should say, just of our system and just of a couple of features that we had. Please remember that you do have the Q&A section within Zoom. So if you do have any questions, please just write them in that Chhabra and I can answer at the end of this, or at least get back to you at the end. So the system I've got in front of me, this is Shaw Clinical. This is the way that we see the world. We have the dashboards for the projects for this fictional study called CentoCan. On the left-hand side of the interface, you have all the other systems that we do have access to. Really importantly, particularly moving forward in the cloud-based world, that you have a unified system. And unified really means one login. You know, if you're logging in and out of systems, that's not useful for anybody. That's not helpful for anybody. You want to be able to flick very quickly and very easily between areas of the system, be it between various tasks, various workflows, or whatever you're doing. For example, here we can view our deviations, we can view our study budget and a project budget. We can click into this and we can look at it at a site level, see the expenses, see the procedure visits that have been done, or even as a monitor, we can come into what we call the Manage tab here, where we actually view the world in a calendar perspective, and you can see those visits upcoming. If I want to look at the project calendar, so the tasks that are happening for the study, I can see all of this within here, and I can manage everything within one click. If I need to view the documents, so within an ETMF perspective, I can actually click straight in and I can view these here. This is what I mean by unified, one login. I'm just clicking in and out. I don't need to log out, log back in and have 19 different screens or several different areas like you're in the film Minority Report. It isn't something that we need to worry about. I can navigate in very quickly and very easily. Again, this is all cloud-based, so something you would be able to do yourself very, very easily. If I want to double click into a document, I can then see that. It's going to load up in front of me in the PDF viewer. And if I need to get this signed, I can either send it on a workflow. For example, if Chhabra needs to sign his CV, we can get him to do that as an investigator. Or I can click on the pencil icon here and we can use the Shaw sign to do this. You just add in a PIN. So to hit those two factors of authentication, we need for Annex 11 and 21 CFR Part 11. Hitting sign now lets us e-sign this document safely and securely. We go above and beyond with lots of different levels of encryption where you can actually verify the validity of that signature within Adobe as well, but you'll see it pop up in front of you here. One way it's got it here, but also it's got this stamp. So this document can be e-signed. If the agencies are accepting e-signatures, you really can and should think about doing this. Very, very important to know that whilst I'm showing it in a clinical operations context in CTMS and ETMF, the technology that we have and the technology that we use can actually be used across any of the business. It really doesn't matter to us what document we want to use. We have an area called the Shaw Drive, which actually lets us accept any type of document, and you can manage any sort of team share. You can have any structure. So if you need to add in patient documents or source documents, it really doesn't matter to us. You can cover the whole perspective. One quick thing I'm going to do as well, I'm going to log in. I've logged into an email account here, which is for Dr. Onorog. Dr. Onorog is a principal investigator within our study. And from here, you can see he's got an email that says he needs to upload a document. And I'm just going to walk through the quick workflow to finish of how we manage the portal that I mentioned, that Shaw portal of being able to log in and out and to get information out of the system without needing a username and a password. So the first thing that he does is to click to complete the task. It's going to load up and it's going to send him a verification code. What that lets us do is keep everything secure with two-factor authentication. Very, very easy for him to manage. He basically runs through a quick wizard to get him into the portal. The email's not working, so I'll just have to cancel that. But basically, it lets you log in, and Dr. Honorol can upload his CV straight into the system itself. If he happens to have sent it to me before, or someone has emailed it across to me, one of the great things we can do if I'm in the ETMF is I can actually upload a document from an email. So if I open up my Outlook, we have a plugin with Outlook, and I can actually drag and drop this CV that's attached to an email. And the system is going to let you store both the email and the attachment. Whether you want to keep them together or separate them is completely up to you. But what the system lets you do is drag and drop straight from Outlook with an attachment. We can have multiple documents attached to an email or single documents. It really doesn't matter to us. But what you're going to see is that email and that CV attached, and it will go straight into the system. We can also add in tagging rules to automatically get that document in where it needs to go. You can see I've got the CV email here. So this is the .msg file, as well as the CV itself. So this actual document, and all I need to do is file it into the right place, hit apply. I can add some more metadata. I can add an expiry date and all that useful information, and it can go into the right place in the system. That's all I wanted to show in terms of a demo. I don't want to go too heavy on everything within here, but just so you guys get an idea of what we do with Sure Clinical and how we see the world. If I just flick back into my presentation deck here, we're going to just go into a quick Q&A and see if anyone has any questions. So I'll hand back to Csaba with that, and let's just see if we have questions there.
Yes, we have some questions, and I still encourage everyone to use the Q&A box. You can see it at the bottom of your screen. So please do submit any questions. So one question which we have received is how to retrieve data remotely if the patients are unable to visit the hospitals.
Yeah, so similar to what I spoke about, really being able to log in and get into the system anywhere lets you retrieve that data from wherever you are, whether it's on your phone, tablet, or laptop. It really doesn't matter to us. The whole point that it's been put or migrated into an online system, into a cloud-based system, means that remote retrieval is incredibly easy. As long as you have the right security to log into the data that you need to find, you can retrieve that basically on the move wherever you are.
Thank you. And another question, what have you seen as the most fundamental technology shift so far?
I think there's two, certainly that I've mentioned. So one of them is just is the remoteness of getting documents into a system. It's highlighted particularly for companies that are very paper-based, the limitations of using paper. So for me, getting documents into a system, whether it's a simple drag and drop from an email or just uploading it through a portal, for me, that's been the biggest shift that I've seen, particularly from our customers that we've recently adopted and those that we're talking to. That, for me, seems to be the simplest fix, but also one of the biggest ones in terms of getting away from paper and then adding on an e-signature solution on the end. Personally think that's where it's been the most beneficial and will continue to be.
Thank you. And there was one actually from one of our attendees who sent this when he or she signed up regarding electronic signatures. So wanted to know about the acceptance of e-signatures versus wet ink signatures in the clinical trial process.
Yeah, we see a lot of our customers using our e-sign technology across the board. As we all know, there are some agencies and some places that at the moment have to accept wet ink. And for those, that's fine. You can still continue to do that. From our point of view, we encourage people to use signatures as much as possible. And we're seeing agencies shift towards e-signatures, and personally think they'll shift even further towards e-signatures. But also with those wet inks, if you have an electronic system, you can keep a record. If that document happens to have been in your eTMF or in your online system, you've then printed it out to wet sign it to send it somewhere. If you're posting it to an agency or whatever it is, you can store attachments to our documents. So one of the things I always recommend to our customers is to keep that copy of the wet signature, that scan, with the original document itself. So you always have that audit trail. You always have the single source of truth, and you can see when that document was signed, where it was sent to keep that full visibility. So whether you're e-signing or wet signing, when you keep them in the same place in one system, it really does add value.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. If we use different CROs with different CTMS systems, is there a way of being able to aggregate the data to be able to generate metrics across our pipeline?
Yeah, so this is a common thing that we're seeing with sponsors. We do actually have the ability, we do have an open API to integrate with them. Of course, it's different for the different CTMSs that are being used. Of course, I'd always recommend a CRO to have their own CTMS anyway. It's always very beneficial to get your own top level view. But there's lots of ways we can do it with integration and across different systems to get that top line view, no matter how many CROs or sponsors you're working with.
Great. So thanks everyone for submitting the questions. And of course, if you have any other questions, please also feel free to reach out to us. I think we have one more slide and coming to the end of our webinar. As a summary, we are in a situation that hasn't been there before. We experience it. We are all in it. I think it's a pragmatic approach that is important here. There are changes and there will be changes and amendments. Collaboration and communication is key with your stakeholders, sponsors, and CROs. Of course, as the main priority is still, the compliance with the protocol, health and safety of the patient, and risk assessment based on each individual trial, considering national and regional restrictions and guidances as well. And I think technology will be playing a very important part in assisting in this transition period. So it's just our contact details, so please feel free to reach out to us if you have also any topics that you want us to cover. We are working on other webinar series that are coming up, so please keep an eye on your email. There's one coming up on April 16th. It's about e-clinical operations and remote monitoring, and we will have another one in European time zone also in the upcoming weeks, so we'll send you more information. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks a lot for participating, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Take care.